I showed up at the airport with my boarding pass printed, suitcase in hand, sunscreen already on like a dork. It was supposed to be our first full family trip in years. Florida, beach house, sunset dinners, but the moment I spotted my mother at the check-in counter, she looked shocked. "Oh, we assumed you cancelled." My name wasn't on the reservation. My sister smiled like it wasn't a big deal. That night, I booked a villa under their name. Same resort, better view. They didn't know yet, but they were about to learn what it feels like to be the one left out. I had triple-checked my packing list the night before. Sunscreen, books, portable charger, even my ancient beach hat that had somehow survived 3 cities and 2 apartments. I'd booked a pet sitter for my cat, turned on the out-of-office reply, and even baked lemon bars to bring on the flight. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a rare Whitman family reunion, the first in years. My mother had mentioned it offhandedly in March. Rachel had chimed in a week later on a phone call saying, "It'll be nice to just hang out like when we were kids." I had confirmed the dates 3 times. Everything pointed to me being part of the plan, which is why on the Thursday afternoon before our flight, I drove to my parents' house in Santa Clarita with a bag in my trunk and optimism in my chest. The sun was still warm despite it being late October. I had my music on shuffle, Norah Jones followed by Radiohead. A strange mix, but comforting. I was in full vacation mode, ready to collapse on my parents' couch and leave at dawn with the rest of them for our flight to Florida. When I pulled into the driveway, Rachel's car was already there, and so was Mason's. Their luggage was stacked near the garage. My dad's ancient cooler, bright red, faded with use, sat by the door. The scene looked like any other family trip, like I was right on time. I grabbed my bag and walked up the steps, still chewing a mint I'd popped in the car. I rang the doorbell once, then knocked. My mum opened the door. Her expression didn't register excitement or warmth. Instead, she looked vaguely puzzled, like I was a neighbor delivering a package that wasn't hers. She stepped outside and gently pulled the door almost closed behind her. "Nora," she said, voice low, "I didn't think you'd actually show up." I blinked, still half smiling. "What do you mean? I brought lemon bars. They're in the car." She hesitated, her fingers tapping the side of the door. "Sweetheart, this trip, it's just Rachel and Mason. Your dad and I are tagging along to help with their transition. They've had a rough few months. We thought they deserved a peaceful getaway." "Okay," I said slowly, my stomach beginning to twist. "But I was invited," she sighed. "It wasn't a formal invitation. We mentioned it, but with how things have been and you being so independent, we just assumed you wouldn't mind." The air between us dropped tenderets. I looked past her shoulder and caught a glimpse of Rachel on the couch, laughing at something on Mason's phone. My dad was in the kitchen facing the wall, pretending to look busy. "You're saying I'm not going?" I asked, voice flat. "You're not on the guest list," she said. "It's nothing personal. You know how tense things get between you and Rachel. We just wanted this to be easy." Easy. That word rang like an insult. I took a step back. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from sheer disbelief. After all the prep, after all the little conversations that now, in hindsight, were deliberately vague. "We'll send you the info soon. Still confirming dates. Flights are almost set." They had never intended for me to come. I wasn't forgotten. I was edited out. "I see," I said. "Well, that's clear now." I turned around and walked back to my car. The mint in my mouth had gone bitter. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Rachel through the living room window. She looked up for a second, then looked away. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes before starting the engine. It wasn't anger, at least not yet. It was a kind of cold, slow disorientation, like stepping onto a staircase that isn't there. Every conversation from the last 3 months began replaying in my head, but in reverse. All the vague phrases, the dodges, still finalizing things. "We'll send you the itinerary once Mason's schedule's confirmed." "Oh, we haven't booked yet, but we will." It hadn't been disorganization. It had been calculated ambiguity. They hadn't forgotten to include me. They deliberately made sure I couldn't tell whether I was ever included to begin with. When I got back to my apartment, I left the suitcase by the door and went straight to the kitchen. I made tea, something to do with my hands. My phone buzzed mid-pour. A Venmo request from my mother. $700, your share of the Florida villa. I stared at it for a full minute, unmoving. $700 for a trip I was never invited to attend. The audacity wasn't even subtle, it was surgical. A financial confirmation of my exclusion, dressed up in shared expense. My hands stopped shaking. I canned the tea. Instead of declining the request, I sent back $1 with a note. Keep an eye on the guest list. Then I opened my laptop. I knew Rachel. I knew her favorite departure times, her obsession with flying early to maximize day one. I also knew she would have picked non-stop flights only. It took me 15 minutes to figure out which airline, then which flight. There it was. 8:25 a.m. LAX to Miami, 2 seats left in economy. I booked one window seat. It wasn't revenge. That would have meant I wanted to hurt them. I didn't. Not really. I just didn't want to disappear on cue. I didn't want to sulk quietly in my apartment while they posted filtered selfies in coordinated beachwear. I didn't want my silence to be interpreted as agreement. They wanted peace, but at my expense. They wanted to curate a reality where I didn't exist, for Rachel's comfort, for family optics, for their own narrative of what easy looks like. So I gave them what they wanted, a peaceful trip, but not one they could control, not completely. I started searching for hotels. No, not hotels. Something better. Something that made a statement without saying a word. I found a private villa 10 minutes up the coast from their resort, with its own infinity pool, direct beach access, and a complimentary airport pickup. 5 nights. It cost more than I wanted to spend. I booked it anyway. I added a note to the reservation. Whitman family has early check-in preference and enjoys champagne upon arrival. Then I emailed the resort concierge. I'll be arriving separately. Please ensure discretion regarding my arrival time and booking details. I signed it Nora Whitman, like it was a name that actually carried weight. Maybe in some twisted way, it did. That night I packed again, not with the same enthusiasm, but with clarity. I folded each item carefully. The old beach hat went in last, right on top. At 5:45 a.m., I left for the airport. Hoodie up, headphones in, sunglasses on. I didn't check a bag. I didn't speak to anyone at check-in. At security, I kept my eyes down. By the time I reached the gate, the boarding area was already crowded. And there they were. Rachel bouncing slightly on her toes like a kid about to board her first flight. Mason scrolling his phone, probably checking fantasy football. My mother pacing slightly, holding their printed itineraries. Even though everything was digital now. My dad sat in the far corner reading a newspaper no one else would bother with. They didn't see me. I didn't let them. LAX was buzzing by the time I parked in the long-term lot. I left nothing to chance, not with how precise everything needed to be. Hoodie up, sunglasses on, I blended into the blur of early travelers. I walked with purpose, but not speed. The goal wasn't to beat them to the gate. The goal was to exist beside them without ever being seen. I had already checked in online and skipped the kiosk. My carry-on wheeled behind me like a silent accomplice. Security moved slower than usual, but I didn't mind. I kept my headphones in, music off, just enough to avoid interaction. As I approached the gate, I veered left and hovered near a window behind a row of tall potted plants. That's when I saw them. All 4, Mum, Dad, Rachel, and Mason. My mother was smiling, animated, as she handed out printed boarding passes like it was 1998. Rachel was mid-sigh, angling the phone for the perfect lighting. Mason leaned in and made a goofy face. The caption probably read something like family trip without stress. It was almost beautiful in its normally. If you didn't know better, you'd think they were the poster family for uncomplicated love. But I knew better. None of them looked anxious. None of them seemed to notice the gap where I should have been, and that stung more than I expected. I waited until boarding began, group by group, zone by zone. I was in group 4, same as always. They were likely in group 2, maybe 3 if they splurged for extra legroom. As the gate agent called my number, I slid into the line, head down. A few passengers grumbled about boarding delays, but my heart beat loudest in my chest. When I stepped onto the plane, it felt like walking into a memory that didn't belong to me. Families were already settling into rows. Overhead bins clicked open and shut. I moved past business class, then premium economy, and into the rear section, row 29, middle seat. My view of the front was blocked. Good. I didn't want to see them yet. Didn't want to risk being seen. As I took my seat, the woman by the window offered a tired smile and went back to reading. The man on the aisle was already asleep, neck pillow askew. I tucked myself in between them like a ghost. Through the faint hum of the plane and the hiss of air vents, I could almost hear Rachel's laugh from 10 rows ahead. It wasn't a laugh meant for me. It never had been. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to disappear. The flight passed in a haze of soft turbulence and silence. I didn't eat, didn't speak, didn't even watch a movie. The man on my right snored through most of it, and the woman by the window barely moved. When the wheels touched down in Miami, I waited. I let every row before me disembark. I had no need to rush. This wasn't about beating anyone. As I stepped off the plane and into the sunlit arrival hall, the humid Florida air curled around my skin like a reminder that something had changed. It wasn't just the weather, it was the intention I'd packed in my suitcase. The woman who had driven to her mother's house 24 hours ago had been hopeful. The woman stepping into the arrivals area now was something else entirely. A driver held a placard just beyond the barrier. Whitman family. He spotted me immediately and smiled. "Miss Whitman," he said, "we're thrilled to have you back. Your family's preferred champagne is already chilling in the suite." I nodded, "Thank you." And he took my bag without question and guided me to a sleek black SUV with cold towels, bottled water, and a welcome note folded beside a silver mint tin. The name on the envelope was simple: Whitman family. As we drove along the coast, I spotted the larger resort complex up ahead, the one where my family had booked their shared villa. It was beautiful, sure, but it was also busy. Children screamed near the pool, umbrellas clashed in colour, and groups posed for group shots under fake palm marches. The kind of place where peace had to be negotiated. We kept driving. 10 minutes later, we pulled into a private gated road, the kind you don't find unless you know exactly what you're looking for. My cabana sat nestled in a grove of real palms, facing a stretch of untouched
sand. It had its own deck, its own infinity pool, and no visible neighbors. The staff greeted me like I was the only guest that mattered. "Welcome, Miss Whitman," the manager said, handing me a key card. "We've prepared the cabana just as you requested. Your note about the Whitman family's arrival was received, and we've already marked the primary system as checked in under your family name." That was the second twist. In the special requests box when I booked, I had written, "Please ensure the system reflects that the Whitman family has checked in. They value privacy." It wasn't a lie. Technically, they were the Whitman family, and I had checked in. I wasn't here to humiliate them. This wasn't sabotage. I didn't touch their actual booking, but I had made sure that when they arrived, bags in hand, expectations high, the front desk would kindly inform them the Whitman reservation has already been claimed. I dropped my bag in the center of the suite and opened the champagne myself. The bubbles snapped like applause. Then I stepped out onto the deck, looked out at the ocean, and smiled. The game hadn't even started yet, but I'd already won something they never expected. A seat at the table they tried to pretend didn't exist. Somewhere around 4 p.m., while I lounged in a hammock with the ocean whispering beyond the trees, my family was arriving. I imagined it with vivid clarity. The SUV pulling up, Rachel hopping out in a linen romper, Mason wheeling their shared luggage with the self-importance of a man who once booked a flight for the entire group and never let anyone forget it. My mother would have approached the front desk first, itinerary in hand, printed in color with bolded dates and flight numbers. Reservation for the Whitman family, she'd say confidently, expecting a warm welcome, maybe even a complimentary drink. Instead, they'd hear, "Oh, the Whitman family has already checked in this morning." The champagne was delivered around 11 a.m. Silence, then confusion. I imagined Rachel's face twisting first, eyebrows raised, lips half open as she waited for someone to explain. My father, clutching the cooler like it held the last shred of order in the world, would stare blankly at the receptionist. Mason would glance at his phone, maybe to double-check the confirmation email he thought he had under control. My mother, always the poised one, would tilt her head and repeat the name slowly. Whitman, YT. Yes, the clerk would say again. Patient but firm. Checked in already. Same last name. Beachfront cabana. There would be a beat just long enough for realization to bubble up. I didn't have to be there to know what happened next. The frantic whispering, the escalating tones, the quiet apology from the staff explaining that unfortunately there was no second booking under the Whitman name, that the cabana was the only high-end unit available this week, that the resort was at full capacity. They were offered a downgrade, a suite near the main pool, garden view, family-friendly, a little cramped, some noise from the kids' club nearby. No private deck, no ocean breeze curling into the sheets. They would have taken it, of course. They had no choice. What else could they do? That was the point. It wasn't about ruining their trip. I wasn't interested in watching them suffer. It was about removing the illusion of control, about letting them taste what it felt like to be unchosen, unprioritized. By 5:23 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Did you do this?" No context, no greeting, just that. I didn't reply. Instead, I adjusted the umbrella shading my chair and dipped my toes into the pool beside me. The water was warm, calming, the kind of quiet you can't get from shared spaces, and shouted laughter. A few moments later, another text came in from Rachel. "We need to talk." That one I didn't even open. The sun began to set over the water, casting long shadows across the cabana deck. I sat there for a while, alone. Not triumphant, not smug, just still. The kind of stillness that only comes when you stop trying to squeeze yourself into places that no longer welcome you. Let them fumble through explanations. Let them whisper in corners and revise the story later. I had no interest in participating. Not anymore. Around sunset, with the sky melting into orange and lavender streaks, I took out my phone and framed the view from my cabana just right. The infinity pool caught the dying light perfectly, and beyond it, the horizon curved like a quiet promise. I snapped one photo, just one, and added a simple caption. Sometimes being left behind is a gift. Then I posted it. No tags, no location, no explanation, just enough ambiguity to spark recognition in the people who knew. Enough serenity to confuse everyone who didn't. I tossed the phone onto the lounge chair and walked barefoot down to the shoreline. The sand was still warm, but not harsh. The breeze carried hints of mango and sea salt, and I felt the corners of my mouth twitch into a real smile. Not performative, not defensive, just present. It was near the outdoor bar, a few yards from the water, where I met them, Kate and Monica. Both in their early 40s, effortlessly confident, the kind of women who wear sunglasses even after sunset, and never apologize for being slightly too loud when they laugh. They just wrapped up a marketing retreat in Miami and decided to extend their trip by a few days. Honestly, we were too exhausted to go home and pretend we're still interested in Q4 projections, Kate said, offering me a second cocktail before I'd even finished the first. We fell into easy conversation. No small talk about family or kids, just stories, sarcasm, and sharp observations about resort decor. Monica was the one who leaned closer after I made a dry joke about overpriced spa facials and said, "You might be the chillest one here." It caught me off guard. Me chill. That wasn't how people usually described me. I was the tense one, the too intense one, the one who always seemed to ruin the vibe by noticing too much. But tonight, with my legs curled on a wicker stool and no one needing me to tone myself down, I didn't feel sharp-edged. I felt light. We stayed out for hours, The bar lights turned golden, then dimmed into soft blues. A band played low-slung jazz near the fire pit. At some point, Monica handed her phone to Kate to take a picture of the three of us. Arms slung over each other's shoulders, drinks in hand, beach behind us. It wasn't meant for anyone. Just a moment worth keeping. I thought of Rachel. Then I pictured her and Mason in their downgraded suite, close quarters with my parents, probably irritated about the noise from the pool and the family next door whose toddler was having a meltdown over a missing beach toy. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel vindicated. What I felt was more unexpected. Peace. Like I had walked out of one narrative and stepped quietly into another. One where I didn't need to prove my place to anyone. Later, as I walked back to my cabana, I checked my phone. My post had 3 comments and 2 messages waiting. One from an old college roommate I hadn't spoken to in years. The other from Rachel. Wow, classy. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened a bottle of water, rinsed off the sand, and crawled into the king-sized bed with crisp white sheets that smelled faintly of lemon and lavender. I turned off every light except the one on the deck. The glow spilled through the window like a gentle reminder that I was still here, that I had always been here. They had tried to make me invisible, but tonight I wasn't hiding. The next morning began with salt air and silence. I woke up before sunrise, not out of anxiety or habit, but because the hush of early light felt like a secret only a few were allowed to hear. I wrapped myself in a linen robe and walked barefoot across the cool tile to the deck, where a small breakfast had already been set out. Sliced papaya, a soft croissant, and fresh guava juice so cold it made my teeth sting. I didn't check my phone. Not at first. Instead, I booked a spa session, Oceanic Renewal, a full 2-hour treatment that included a seaweed wrap, marine salt exfoliation, and an hour-long massage with volcanic stones. It sounded excessive. I booked it anyway. The spa was nestled into a quiet corner of the estate, half open to the breeze, shaded by palms and low-hanging orchids. The moment I stepped in, the scent of lemongrass and eucalyptus settled over me like a weighted blanket. My therapist, a gentle woman with an island-like lilt to her voice, asked no unnecessary questions. I undressed, lay on the warm treatment bed, and let someone else be in charge of comfort for once. Halfway through the massage, my phone buzzed 3 times from inside the locker. Then again and again. I ignored it. It buzzed once more during the seaweed wrap, a single sharp vibration that somehow carried the weight of familiarity. I sighed. By the time I returned to the changing room and finally checked, there were 6 texts from my mother, 4 from Rachel, 2 missed calls from my father, and 1 voicemail. The messages were predictable. Mom, you've made your point. This is just mean now. Mom, you're ruining the vacation for everyone. Mom, what kind of daughter does this? Rachel, so dramatic. Rachel, grow up. Rachel, this was supposed to be peaceful. Rachel, you've always made everything about you. None of them asked how I was. Not one. I opened the voicemail last. My father's voice, soft and tired, filled the speaker. Hey, Nora. Look, I know things got tense, but this isn't helping anyone. Just let it go. Come by the suite. Let's talk. We're family. We don't need all this pride, okay? There was a pause before he added, almost as an afterthought, we miss you. I stood there, still damp from
the wrap, skin tingling from sea salt and eucalyptus oil, listening to the echo of his voice fade into nothing. A few feet away, a small speaker played a soft oceanic soundtrack. Waves, gulls, wind through trees. The contrast made me dizzy. They missed me. Or they missed the version of me who let them write the narrative. I didn't respond, not out of spite, not even out of anger. I just didn't see the point. There was no apology in those messages, no ownership, just a demand wrapped in guilt, delivered with the expectation that I'd fall back into place like I always had. I left the spa without replying. Outside, the day was already warming. I took the long path back to the cabana, the one that looped near the edge of the resort's private trail. No crowds, no noise, just the sound of my own breathing, steady and sure. My family wanted closure on their terms, but I wasn't playing their game anymore. I didn't intend to run into Mason. In fact, I had taken the beach trail that curved furthest from the main resort to avoid any chance encounters. But life, or irony, has its own choreography. I saw him before he saw me, sitting alone on a stone ledge just where the palm canopy gave way to open sky, a half-drunk beer in one hand, flip-flops dangling from the other. He looked up, and for a second, neither of us spoke. Then he raised his bottle in a small wave and said, "Didn't expect to see you here." I hesitated, but curiosity outweighed caution. I walked over and sat 2 feet away, leaving a respectful buffer of sand between us. "They're unraveling," Mason said after a long sip. "Your mum cried at breakfast. Rachel slammed a door so hard a painting fell off the wall." I didn't respond. "She wasn't expecting you to actually show up, you know," he added, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Definitely not like this. Private cabana, drinks with strangers, like none of this touched you." Still, I said nothing. Mason laughed, but it sounded tired. "You know, the weird part is you're the only one acting like a grown-up." That made me glance over. He shrugged. "I mean it. Rachel's been spiraling since we landed. Your mum's playing the martyr, your dad's checked out. Says he just wants a peaceful trip, but won't say a word about what actually happened." "And you?" He paused. "You just left." I looked down at the sand. He reached into the small messenger bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out something unexpected, a USB drive. He held it out without looking at me. "What is this?" I asked cautiously. "Something I probably shouldn't have seen," he said. Rachel left it open on the shared laptop. "It's a screenshot of an email she sent your mum 3 months ago. I took the USB but didn't move to examine it yet. She titled it Vacation Plan." "No, Nora," Mason said, voice low. "She literally wrote, 'Make sure Nora's not invited. She ruins everything.'" It wasn't the content that hurt. It was the clarity, the finality of being erased in plain language. "She's been pushing for this for a while," Mason added, "but blames you for everything that ever got tense. Her college dropout, you that fight at Dad's retirement party, you the fact that she and your mum don't get along unless there's a common enemy." I finally looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" He shrugged again. "Because it's the truth, and because if it were me, I'd want someone to show me the receipt." I pocketed the drive. "I don't expect you to do anything with it," he added quickly. "Burn it, delete it, whatever. I just figured someone owes you the dignity of the full picture." We sat in silence again. A crab scuttled by, frantic and oblivious. The wind had picked up, tossing strands of my hair across my face. "I'm sorry," Mason said finally. "For what it's worth." I stood. "Thanks for this," I said, patting my pocket. "You didn't have to," and he gave a small nod. "For what it's worth," he repeated. "I think you deserved the invite more than any of us." As I walked away, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just done. They hadn't excluded me because they forgot. They had conspired to pretend I didn't matter. And that's exactly what I was going to stop doing. Late afternoon sun stretched long across the deck as I returned from a quiet swim. The breeze had picked up slightly, rustling the sheer curtains of my cabana, and everything felt washed in that golden haze that only seems to exist in vacation postcards. I had almost forgotten about people like Rachel, about letters, about bitterness, until I saw the staff member waiting politely outside my door. She wore a kind smile and held a folded piece of resort stationery. "This was dropped off for you by another guest," she said gently, then handed it over. No name, just a room number scribbled in hurried handwriting across the corner of the envelope. I knew exactly who it was from. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I nodded, thanked her, and carried it inside. I placed the envelope on the patio table next to my glass of hibiscus tea and resumed my spot on the lounge chair. The ocean was starting to tint darker, the sky slowly shifting from peach to indigo. Eventually, curiosity edged out indifference. I opened the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper folded twice. "This is embarrassing. You've made us all look petty. You've ruined the trip." No salutation, no signature, just those 3 sentences in Rachel's unmistakable slant. The same way she used to sign passive-aggressive notes on the fridge when we were teenagers. I didn't flinch, didn't roll my eyes, didn't even feel the flicker of indignation that used to ignite with every sharp-edged sentence she threw my way. Instead, I folded the letter neatly again and placed it under the bottom of my cold glass. The condensation bled into the paper slowly, as if even the moisture in the air didn't want to dignify its message with urgency. I turned back to my book. It wasn't even that interesting, a paperback novel I had grabbed on impulse at the airport. The protagonist had already made 3 absurd choices that made no emotional sense, but it didn't matter. Right now, reading about someone else's misguided decisions felt oddly soothing. In the distance, I could hear laughter from the main pool area, the shrill, delighted kind that only children and the very drunk seem to master. Somewhere, a steel drum band was setting up for evening entertainment. The world kept spinning, oblivious to the melodrama trying to anchor me. That letter, it was meant to sting, meant to shame. But more than anything, it read like fear, like Rachel had lost control of a story she was used to narrating and didn't know how to rewrite it now that I'd stopped playing my part. She hadn't expected me to take up space. She hadn't expected me to win by walking away. And so now she'd resorted to guilt, delivered not face-to-face, but through a folded sheet of paper, hoping I'd crack without confrontation. But here's the truth. When you've been ignored long enough, silence becomes a kind of fluency. And I had become fluent. I didn't need to yell or fight or explain, not anymore. The glass stayed in place, its chilled base soaking into the stationery with patient finality. The message would blur, the ink would run, and maybe if I left it there long enough, it would dissolve into nothing. I turned another page. The morning light crept through the curtains and warmed the cabana deck, just as the resort's social media notifications blinked to life on my phone. Kate had posted that photo, the 3 of us laughing on the boat's deck, sun streaking through our hair, ocean stretching behind us like a promise. The caption read, "When strangers feel more like home." I stared at it for a moment, letting the words sink in. Strangers home. Funny how that felt more accurate than anything I'd known in years. The photo was simple. My shoulders leaned back, glasses half mirrored, laughter caught unfiltered. No hashtags, just honesty. Something inside me shifted, a lightness I hadn't felt since landing. But then my screen buzzed again. A message from Rachel. "Delete that post or I'll report it." No, hi, no, hope you're enjoying. Just that a threat disguised as decorum, like she was sending a law book instead of a text. My first instinct to fume, but instead I closed the notification and slipped the phone into my bag. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond. I walked down to the private edge of the beach, feeling the sand shift beneath bare feet. The tide crept in slow and sure. I thought of how I used to retreat, how I used to delete the messy bits of my life to keep the peace. But this time, I let it stand. Later that afternoon, while I was lounging with a book and 2 empty coconut halves beside me, an email pinged from an unrecognized address, Whitman Family Legal Affairs. My breath slowed as I clicked it open. It was formal, typed on letterhead, and chillingly precise. Subject: unauthorized use of surname. Dear Ms. Whitman, it has come to our attention that you have used the surname Whitman in connection with third-party reservations and social media posts that reference the family name. Please be advised that the use of Whitman without explicit written consent in public or commercial contexts is unauthorized. We request that you immediately cease and desist from using the surname in any future booking or public forum. Failure to comply may result in legal action. Sincerely, Whitman Family Counsel. I closed the email slowly, the seat beneath me suddenly less steady. No signature, no warmth. It was the final twist. Kate's photo had been a lifeline, but Rachel's text, the threat, and now this email. They were all variations of the same note. You hold no stake here. I thought of the champagne beneath the cabana table, the swimming pool still rippling under a noon sun, and I thought, I'll use my name if I want to. I closed the laptop and stood. The sky was midday bright. I walked to where the sand met the water and let the tide wash over my ankles. They wanted me silent, invisible, compliant. But silence had already become my voice. I sent the photo to Kate and Monica later that afternoon with a simple message. Thanks for a real day. That night I didn't sleep by chance. I slept by choice in this cabana, with a name I didn't steal, only claimed, and a peace I didn't earn through drama, but through walking away. The flight home was quiet, almost eerily so. No turbulence, no crying babies, just white noise and window views. Nora sat in the back of the plane, sunglasses on, headphones over her ears, but no music playing. She watched clouds pass beneath them like soft shifting islands and didn't once check her phone. Back in LA, the city felt unfamiliar in its routine hum. The usual traffic, the taco stands still open at midnight, the blinking lights outside her apartment. All of it now felt oddly distant, like a life she'd watched someone else live. The next morning, she did what she should have done months ago. She blocked every number in her family group chat. Rachel, her parents, even Mason, though his message on that beach had lingered, not out of spite, but necessity. The silence wasn't an act of rebellion anymore. It was a form of maintenance, like watering a plant or finally turning off a dripping faucet. She deleted the shared calendars, removed birthdays, archived the family email thread that her mum still used for holiday planning. Gone, all of it. Her phone had never looked so empty or so light. Work came quietly, and she welcomed it. She redesigned a reading nook for a client in Silver Lake, spent 2 days sourcing hand-woven throws, and repainted the client's studio in a blue-grey tone that reminded her of early Hawaii skies. It felt good, honest to build something without having to explain why, to be wanted for a skill, not negotiated into a space. Then there was the painting. Nora hadn't touched a canvas in years, but one Saturday she opened the storage closet and pulled out a forgotten easel, set it by the window, and just started. Abstract, mostly watercolors bleeding into one another like emotion without language. Her first attempt was ugly but free, the second bolder. By the fourth, she had stopped thinking entirely. Life narrowed into a rhythm of color and quiet. And then came Jude. They met at a gallery opening in Culver City, one of those minimalist exhibits where the wine flowed more freely than the conversation. Jude stood in front of a black and white portrait, 2 hands reaching toward each other but not quite touching, his head slightly tilted, a subtle frown on his face. "You see the space between their fingers?" he asked, noticing Nora beside him. "It's like the artist painted the absence, not the connection." Nora looked at him. He wasn't flashy, wore a brown corduroy jacket with faint paint stains and boots that had seen seasons. "I think that's the point," she replied. "Sometimes the absence says more." They didn't exchange numbers that night, just names. But 3 days later, she saw him again. At the same cafe near the art district, they both ordered the same drink. He remembered her name. She remembered the boots. Their first real conversation lasted 3 hours. Jude didn't ask about her family, didn't ask about drama. He asked about her paintings, what she listened to when she worked, how she chose color palettes. He talked about his own work, an architect who preferred sketching in notebooks over KD software, who liked buildings that breathed. When he laughed, it was soft. When he listened, it was fully. Nora found herself relaxing in ways she didn't expect. They didn't talk every day, they didn't need to, but on the days they did, Nora felt less like she was defending herself and more like she was just being. No edge, no apology, just a steady, slow unfolding of presence. And in that presence, something began to mend. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like walls breaking without a sound. It was a Tuesday evening, and the apartment was lit by nothing more than a desk lamp and the gentle glow of streetlights through the blinds. Nora sat cross-legged on her couch, a sketch pad in her lap, pencil trailing absent-minded lines across the page. The world outside was hushed, and for once, so was her mind. Then came the knock, firm, 3 times. No buzz from downstairs, no text in advance. She froze. Visitors weren't a thing here, not unannounced, not in this new world she'd built of clean edges and controlled silence. When she opened the door, Rachel stood there, hair messily pulled back, roots grown in, makeup smudged or absent entirely. She wore a windbreaker Nora remembered from college, faded teal with a frayed cuff, and gripped a wrinkled piece of folded paper like it was the only thing anchoring her. Nora didn't speak, neither did Rachel, then it's Mum. Nora blinked. Rachel's voice was rough, dry, like she hadn't spoken for hours. Or perhaps had spoken too much to everyone but the one person who mattered. Heart attack mild. They think she's stable. But she asked for you. The words dropped like stones into still water, rippling out from Nora's chest. She. Rachel stumbled over the next sentence, then simply extended the folded paper between them. Nora took it without touching her sister's hand. It was Resort Stationery Hotel logo at the top, written in their mother's spiky, once pristine cursive. If I was wrong, I'm sorry. I love you either way. That was all. No signature, no date, no dramatic flourish. Just a sentence and a fracture Nora hadn't prepared for. She stared at it too long. Rachel shifted her weight. She said your name first, she added. Quieter now, before mine, before Dad's. Nora looked up, eyes locked on her sister's for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Rachel looked defeated, not performatively sad, not tear-streaked for effect, just stripped down to the version of herself that used to sneak into Nora's room during storms as kids. Small, unsure human. Still, Nora said nothing. She didn't invite her in, didn't reach for a coat or ask for a hospital address. Rachel nodded slowly, maybe expecting that, maybe knowing. She's scared, she added, voice barely above the hum of the hallway. Not just about her heart, about you not coming. Not because you're mad, because she thinks maybe you've really moved on. That one hit deeper than the letter, because it was true. For the first time, Nora hadn't been pretending to be done. She was done. Rachel stepped back, hands buried deep in the pockets of that old windbreaker. I got a rideshare here, she said. Car's in the shop. It was such a Rachel thing to mention, as if car trouble still outranked emotional implosions. She didn't wait for a response, just turned and walked back toward the street, shoulders hunched, not from cold, but from something older, heavier, maybe regret. Nora watched her until she disappeared from view. She didn't follow, didn't call out. Instead, she closed the door, turned off the lamp and sat in the dark with the note in her hand. She didn't cry, didn't scream, but her hand trembled just once, as if the walls weren't breaking anymore. They were already broken. Nora didn't go to the hospital. She didn't even open her phone for the next 24 hours. The folded note stayed on the kitchen table, its paper curled slightly at the corners by the coastal humidity that seeped through the old apartment's windows. She didn't move it, didn't hide it, just left it there, like a lit candle. She wasn't ready to blow out, but couldn't bring herself to tend. It wasn't anger that kept her away. It was exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones after years of bending to make space for people who always seem to shrink you in return. Nora had done enough bending. Rachel's messages came steadily. First a simple, she's awake, still asking about you. Then she's hurting Nora. You not showing up is making it worse. Later that night, one more. You've made your point. Now come fix it. Nora didn't answer, not because she didn't feel something twist inside her with each message, but because that something no longer overrode the rest of her. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about hurt anymore. It was about choosing what didn't hurt. Her phone buzzed again, this time a ding from Gmail. She glanced at the subject line from Lay Reconsider. She didn't open it, didn't need to. She swiped left and let it slide directly into the trash. Nora spent that day painting, not for clients, not for anyone else, just for herself. The canvas was large, nearly the full height of her living room wall, and for the first time she painted a figure, solitary, faceless, standing at the edge of a cliff with the ocean stretching wide below. The sky above was layered in greys and soft reds, not stormy, but unsettled. And the figure wasn't jumping. She wasn't falling. She was simply standing. That night, Jude came over. He didn't ask about the note, didn't ask about the silence. He brought Thai food and a bottle of wine and left his phone face down on the counter. When they sat on the couch, he tucked his arm behind her shoulders and said, "You feel quieter tonight." Nora leaned into him. "I'm just done explaining myself." They ate in comfortable stillness, the kind that didn't demand anything from her. When he left, he kissed her on the cheek, soft and slow, and told her to text if she couldn't sleep. She didn't. She slept soundly for the first time in days. In the morning, the sky was overcast and the ocean air drifted in through the cracked balcony door. Nora made tea, set it beside the note, and watched steam rise from both. She still hadn't decided what to do with it, but for once she didn't feel like it was pressing. It could stay there. It could stay unanswered. Some apologies didn't need answers. Some wounds weren't gaping, just reminders. A few hours later, her phone buzzed one last time. Rachel again, one line. "Mum says she'll wait, but she doesn't know how long she can." Nora read it, exhaled, and closed her messages. She didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because sometimes peace means not explaining why you chose peace. It was Jude's idea. No pressure, no grand suggestion, just a quiet invitation. One Sunday morning, as he watched her stare at the canvas, she couldn't finish. "Let's drive up the coast," he said. "I want to show you something." She agreed without asking where. She just needed the motion, the hum of tires and coastline, the kind of silence that came with ocean wind and no expectations. They didn't talk much on the drive. He played a playlist full of old acoustic tracks and movie scores. Nora leaned her head against the window and watched as the city thinned into cliffs and dunes. It wasn't until they turned off the main road that she realized where they were headed. The sign for the resort appeared like an echo, not the same entrance, she remembered, but the same stretch of island, the same turquoise outline of sea behind manicured palm trees. Her breath hitched just once. Jude didn't park at the front. Instead, he turned down a gravel path she'd never noticed before. It led to a bluff above the water with no other cars in sight. When he cut the engine, the only sound was waves and distant birds. He turned to her gently. "You once said this was the first place you ever felt truly alone, in a good way." Nora nodded slowly, fingers tightening in her lap. "I thought maybe it could be the place where you let go too." He didn't follow her when she stepped out. He just stayed by the car, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes watching the sea. Nora walked down a narrow trail of sand. Every step felt like retracing something she hadn't realized was unfinished. She reached the base of the path and let her feet sink into the shore. The sun was low, casting gold onto the waves. The wind tugged at her sleeves, gentle but constant. She stood there, eyes closed, breathing. In her pocket was the bracelet, silver, thin, a delicate clasp her mother had given her on her 30th birthday. Back when their love still resembled something like closeness. She hadn't worn it in months, but today she'd felt the weight of it again. Her fingers moved to the clasp, unfastened it, held it in her palm. It wasn't about anger, not anymore. It wasn't even about rejection. It was about release. The bracelet caught one last glint of sunlight before she let it drop. It hit the water with no sound, disappeared beneath a curl of foam, and was gone. She stood still, waited, not for a sign, just for the moment to settle. Then she whispered to the wind. Not a goodbye, not a plea, just a truth. "I don't need them to understand." When she turned back, Jude was still there. He didn't ask what she'd done. He didn't need to. They drove home with the windows down, salt air in their lungs. And later that night, as Nora sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, she looked at the stars above the city and felt finally untouched, not cold, not numb, just quiet. And in the quiet, she understood something that didn't need words. Peace doesn't beg to be understood.